Saron, first of all, we just would like to hear more of sort of like your background and as a community organizer and a person involved in so many like different struggles and helping the community. How like did you get into like this year now running for mayor of Toronto?
Yeah, so I'm a lawyer, and I'm really sort of well known for running a lot of cases around police brutality and a variety of human rights issues. And I have a long history in Weston Road, but across the city in terms of fighting for social justice, fighting against poverty and systemic racism. And as everyone knows, recently we saw a major political upset in the U.S. with the victory of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is a Puerto Rican young woman from the Bronx and had zero electoral experience and ran her first campaign and unseated a 10-term incumbent in the primary. And in many ways as a source of inspiration for us here in the city of Toronto in terms of what's possible here. My platform is I'm on a mission to fight for working class people in the city of Toronto and for immigrants, migrants, asylum seekers, racialized communities, and for the people of the city of Toronto, who now comprise the majority of the population. It's 51% of people in the city are racialized, and so we're having a moment in Toronto.
Definitely, that's true. That's true. That's great to hear. That all sounds like pretty amazing. And actually, just seeing like the situation in the city and in the province as well, right? Like, how would you think it would be able to work with like now a premier elected Doug Ford when he's like clearly supporting like the police programs that are racist, such as like carding and then the TAVIS programs as well. You know, is going back on the sex ed curriculum and cutting funds for renewables and the whole like environmental sector in the province. How would you think it would be able to work with this sort of like difficult person as a province leader and bringing still like a good environment for the city in terms of like as you're talking about working with the communities, the racialized communities, and this other stuff that he's attacking?
This is a prime example of why we really, really need to mobilize in the city of Toronto and elect progressive leadership at a municipal level. This is a really difficult time for a lot of people in the city and across the province in terms of a sort of a law and order agenda that's been advanced by our premier. Right now, as we know, he's calling for tougher bail conditions. The current Tory is also calling for a tough on crime agenda where 200 more police officers will be hired this year. And my mission this year is to really amplify the voices of the people, which is to really run on common sense, which is to say that we need more jobs for young people and less police, and that if we had more opportunities for young people to work and succeed, we wouldn't need to resort to criminalizing young people and incarcerating them. So a number of my campaign co-chairs are actually inmates at a number of incarceration facilities, and we get our expertise from those who know firsthand what it's like to be in street organizations and what it's like to be incarcerated and to get our solutions directly from those people who are a big part of our community. So it's a real opportunity to mobilize the masses in Toronto and advance the working class agenda.
Mm-hmm. There was also recently the sort of like community sent a letter to Tory and I'm pretty sure Chief Saunders as well, how as you just mentioned, how like police isn't the solution for the whole crime like situation that the city is going through, that actually like fund and education, healthcare, and so many things are necessary for all communities to sort of like avoid this real problem. Are you aware of that letter? Did you sort of sign up with it as well?
Absolutely, and I wrote a letter as well, and I am really, really, really appalled at some of the language that we've been seeing come out of John Tory around quote unquote rounding up the thugs, using words like gangsters, sewer rats, and really pejorative language to describe young people. And so now more than ever, we really, really need to hear from ordinary people to say policing and more policing is not the answer. 1/10 of the city's budget does go to policing. That's approximately $1 billion. 90% of that item goes towards salaries. That's before the hiring of 200 more police officers. So what we're calling for is redistribution of resources to redirect, instead of hiring 200 more police officers, how about hiring 200 more young people in every priority neighborhood in the city of Toronto?
Cool. What do you think about the question of affordable housing and homelessness in the city of Toronto?
So housing is a major crisis in the city of Toronto, and it's not being treated like a crisis. So any young person, recent grad, will be able to tell you people can't afford to live. Housing is just out of hand, and it really, I'm just beside myself in terms of how much of a struggle this is for so many people, families, young people, senior citizens. And so under our platform, it's based on the premise of housing as a fundamental right that is enshrined under international law, and that the City of Toronto has an obligation to adhere to those standards. And as we know, in the last 4 years, we haven't seen any real change. It was just in the last couple of weeks that Tory came out with a housing committee at the tail end of his term. So once elected, my plan is to treat housing the housing problem here as a crisis, and to use that language that we have a real crisis in Toronto, and that we cannot wait another 5 decades for this problem to be resolved, and this has to be priority number one. Under the HOT plan, there was a target of 100,000 units that were supposed to be built. That never happened. And so under our website, you'll see all the details around what our plan is around addressing it. But the point that I'm trying to drive home is that people just can't wait for another century for this to be resolved, and that it is something that we can tackle.
Great. And then you think that, like, as we were just talking about before, in the case of like increasing the minimum wage, the 5 for 15, and how it's actually reaching out to so many communities, not only Toronto but in the province, as such like an instrument to make people's lives a little bit better, and the city somehow should like join this sort of campaign, support it, and make sure that business or like paying workers decent wages, and even the other aspect of it, which is like equal pay, the paid sick days, because so many families need those kind of like conditions, right?
Mm-hmm. I stand 100% behind the 15 in Fairness campaign. I'm really, really proud of the movement for achieving some victories on that campaign, and really the pushback from corporate giants like Tim Hortons and a number of other major corporations is an indication of how big of a class struggle we actually have in the city of Toronto and in the province. And so, $15 to start, but really we know that even at $15, that clearly isn't enough for a family to sustain itself. But it is certainly a start, and is something that this campaign wholeheartedly believes in. Especially in light of the growing sort of levels of poverty that we're seeing in the city. If it's interesting, as a business owner myself and having multiple employees, it's funny that we haven't seen pushback from small businesses. The pushback has been from the Loblaws and the Tim Hortons and corporate giants, and it's been under the banner of small businesses that a lot of the narrative has been coming out saying, oh, this is going to destroy small businesses. But really, the vast majority of small businesses in this area, and I believe in the city, would say that they stand behind 15 in Fairness, because you need to have your employees have a living wage. But it's really Loblaws that we saw the biggest pushback from, in Tim Hortons. So yeah, I'm 100% in solidarity with that campaign.
Great. And just like one last question, which is just, how can we support your campaign and the all like outreach you're doing and organizing it? We have like sort of a tight schedule there until October, but like how can out of like here the Southwestern community, how can like more people support you?
Yeah, so I always tell everyone this is not just a campaign. It's not just about the electoral process. We are building a movement, and it's one person at a time, one family at a time, one day at a time. And this is really a lifelong movement that we're building right out of here. It started in Weston Road, and it's quickly growing. And we want to educate the masses around the politics of rebates and understand how the electoral system works around here. And most people don't know, but when you donate, almost up to 75% of that donation one gets back. So if someone donates $100, they're getting $75 back. and we need to educate our communities, because when we do that education work, people say, wow, I didn't know that. So this is a city that belongs to the working class, that belongs to immigrants, that belongs to all of us. And so the way to support is really vote on October 22nd, and I encourage people also to look at what's happened in the U.S. with Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and get some inspiration from that to continue the movement here in the city of Toronto.
Great, right. Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Yeah, gracias.